Welcome. This video is going to cover Chapter 17, our security strategies and documentation. In other words, we're just going to throw all kinds of different eclectic information and pieces regarding security and our documentation at you. So best practices, right, with our physical security, right, we want to lock our doors and keep things, under lock and key whenever possible. You can use key locks, combination locks, biometric locks. There are cables and other types of locks for our equipment that can keep the physical device secured to a table or wall or something like that. And then we even have some locks that you can prevent people from taking the ports or using ports that they not supposed to be using, or removing devices, things like that. Then there's privacy screens. These are good to be installed on laptops. And then if you only look at it straight on as a user, you can see the screen. But if you look at it from angles like someone trying to look over your shoulder, they won't be able to see the screen. Here's examples of some physical locks for the computer devices. You see on the right where the laptop is actually physically locked with a cable to the desk, right, so that the laptop's not easy to take. Here are examples of some port locks to prevent someone from using ports and plugging things in. You've got what looks like to be USB ports, and then a RJ45 port lock to prevent anybody from putting in other devices. Also, with our physical security, there are theft prevention plates, right? It's embedded into the case, so engraved with your ID information onto it as well, and just to help, in case things were actually stolen. Man trap. Here we go with some of the eclectic, stuff we're throwing in, but it is physical security related. A man trap is when you have two doors. And then usually a security guard in between the two doors. First door lets you in, but once you're in the room with a security guard, you have to be able to badge into the second door to get into the actual data center or area. And if you can't badge in, you're not able to get out the other door that you came in, unless the security guard lets you through, because you need to prove why you're there and what's going on. You need to have access, but it's called a man trap because once you enter the room, if you don't have access, you can't go anywhere. You have to talk with a security guard, typically. Now we're leaving physical security and going to some logical security. And of course, one of the big things is having antivirus or anti-malware on your devices. Email filtering, right, to filter out suspicious messages. An organization might use data loss prevention. This is software that will help protect certain tagged data from being emailed or copied onto removable media. It knows certain data as to be high value and is not authorized to leave the corporation. That's what the software does, and it prevents the data from getting outside of the organization, because you're not able to email it. You're not able to copy it to a USB or external drive. It has measures in place to prevent that, or at least at the very least detect it and tell who did it. Then we should only download from trusted software sources, publishers and providers, companies we trust and know. Then we should use our access control lists, our ACLs, ACLs. These control users and devices, groups and programs, etc. They actually, dictate what you're able to do on a device or system. That's called the access control list. Then we also have some port security and MAC address filtering, right? So you can enable a port that only certain devices can be enabled on that port. Typically, it's used with MAC address filtering. Once again, the MAC address is the address assigned to every physical network card, and even virtual network card gets one too. But the physical, it's embedded and hard coded on the network card, and so you can specify, one, how many MAC addresses a port can have, or the allowed MAC addresses that the port can have. This would mean that on a switch, certain machines, you might just say that only your laptop can be plugged into that port. Any other machine, the port would not work for. And so you can set that up. It's a lot of overhead. It's a lot of management. But in a small organization, it might be okay. Just guarantees that nobody's abusing your system, right? Or in a very highly secured area, working on, like government projects and things like that. You definitely probably would have this level of security because all the devices that could be plugged into that port are known and verified, and only those devices would be allowed by their MAC address. VPNs allow us to connect to other networks securely. It makes that remote connection over the internet, a public, non-trusted environment. We can now trust and create a private network and act like we're right physically in the organization. We can work from home, but your computer acts as just like it's at the organization in the corporate office because it establishes a virtual private network. Next, we have mobile device management, or MDM. This is a software that allows organizations to manage and track mobile devices and the data on those devices. It can ensure certain security policy enforcements, such as certain software is installed or isn't installed, that the device hasn't been rooted, that the data is encrypted, and also can allow the company the ability to completely wipe the phone or device remotely. So now we get into user authentication, right? So besides passwords, we can use all kinds of other methods, but with passwords, we can increase its security by one, having a password policy that makes sure that we have a certain length of password, complexity requirements are met, and then how often a user has to reset the password or change the password, and then how many times can they reuse a password, if at all, right? That's a password policy. But then we have other factors or other authentication options, and multi-factor is two or more factors. And you usually have at least two, and when you do multi-factor, sometimes you can have more, but usually just two. But it's, something like your password, something you have, like a token or a smart card, or something that you do, your typing speed, your pace, how you type, um, or something you are, right? So biometric data such as your fingerprint, iris scan, um, maybe even your voice, right? Um, Although that might be something that you do, your cadence and your voice. But still, it's multi-factor if you use two or more of these, right? So security tokens, there's several types. The smart card has an embedded microprocessor installed on the card that has the information required for authentication in there, or you have a key fob, and it might generate a code. But you also have security tokens. And many of you've probably used those. You try to log into Google or Facebook or something, and it asks you for your code, and you have to go to the app authenticator token generator, and you get the 6-digit code, and you type that in. So you're doing multi-factor authentication. When you're doing that, it's just a software token. But then there could be a digital certificate. You could have it instead of a code or token. You could have a digital certificate that's issued by a certificate authority. That's a trusted known entity that has verified who you are, and then thus, if you have the certificate, it proves that's who you are. So if you have a password and the digital certificate, it's pretty good likelihood that it's who you are, and you can authenticate that way. Here's just a picture of a smart card and the smart card reader. Like I said, the card has information on it, and it proves who you are, or authorizes you to do something, right? Like in this case, your bank account. Here's an example of a token fob, a security fob, right? And it gives you that code just like our software generator tokens give us the 6-digit code. There are security fobs that are available for this use. And here's that example of using it with Facebook with a software token. This is using a digital certificate provided by Global Sign. Right? It's just proving that it's Google, right? Google trusted, right? Certificate, yeah. But its certificate of authority has issued this, and is a trusted certificate. We have several means of user authentication, and there are 3 general measures with user authentication. It's called AAA, which is authenticating, authorizing, and accounting. And there are 2 very popular solutions to provide AAA services on larger networks. Radius is a remote access dial-in user service. It's been around for many years. It was developed and utilized heavily with dial-up, but today now it deals with wireless connections, devices, and VPNs, among other things. But it is highly used in that. And then we have this TAC-ACS, Terminal Access Controller Access Control System Plus. It's a newer AAA service. Acts just a lot like Radius. There are some differences as far as the protocols used. I believe Radius can use TCP and UDP, where TAC-ACS only uses TCP. TAC-ACS is Cisco, though. It's a proprietary Cisco protocol. And here's just showing 2 different corporate network layouts. basically using the exact same thing. So you got a wireless uh, end user over here in this corporation that's wanting to access the corporate network, and it needs to access it through the wireless. Like I said, these are used a lot with wireless, right? And so if we use the WPA2 enterprise version, right? That's when we need a radius server that does the user authentication. And so the laptop would connect to the wireless access point. It would have to have a username and password, which would get validated by the radius server. If it validated, then it would be allowed into the network. And then they would have to also then log into Active Directory to be able to access their corporate resources. Here on this other network, we just have a network administrator's laptop. It's plugged into a switch, most likely a Cisco switch, because TACAX is Cisco related. And so then it would need its login and password on the Cisco server. If it was authenticated, then it would be allowed access onto the network, and then at which time it would still then need to log into Windows Server and access Active Directory. And here is the breakdown. So primary use is for radius, is intended for end user network access, where TACAX is intended for Cisco network device administration access, right? And then encryption, radius encrypts the user passwords only, and TACAX encrypts everything, right? Underlying protocol, radius protocol uses UDP, which does not guarantee, right? Okay, I knew there was a difference, right? So radius uses UDP, which is not guaranteed, and TACAX uses TCP, which is guaranteed. And then the network types, radius works on wireless, wired, and VPN. TACAX works on wireless, wired, and VPN. So they're very similar, but yeah, TACAX is really used in Cisco networks, and then mostly used for administrating the Cisco devices. All right, so an acceptable use policy. It is a document that explains what you can or can't do on a corporate network. It's a high-level policy. Policies are high-level. They just give that 50,000-foot view, like never give out your passwords, do not store your passwords, lock down your workstation, be alert for tailgating, right? But they don't tell you how it's done, or they may say that you need a secure password, but they may not describe what a secure password is. That's for procedures. You have policies and procedures. Policies define the high level, and procedures give detail on how to do it. Hackers are definitely trying to obtain information or trick people. People are many times nowadays our weakest link. Most of our equipment and security is pretty robust, and most of the time information gets stolen or leaked because of user actions. But so hackers have been known to dumpster dive, right? They'll go through the company's trash looking for information to give them any kind of head advantage into what kind of equipment they have, who might be responsible for certain things, who could be a good target, right? And then they do a lot of electronics ways of tricking people too, with phishing, spear phishing, impersonation and spoofing, right? So, just phishing is just trying to scam you into responding with some personal data, right? So they send you an email saying that your account was compromised. Click here to reset your password, right? And then you go in and you follow the link, but it's not your bank or not the company that you thought. It's the hacker's site that looks like your company's or your bank's information. Spear phishing, right, it is a hoax email that appears to come from companies you already do business with. Spoofing, right, they just make it look, the website look like the real thing. And then, right, or it could have a link that leads to a script or a website that has a malicious script that does and runs things and grabs information off your machine. Here's an example of a phishing technique in an email. I'm not going to read it to you. There are some sites that help debunk virus hoaxes or email hoaxes, snoops.com, securelist.com, virusbtn.com. So then when you're traveling with a laptop, always know where your laptop is. Never leave it in a car, locked or unlocked. I would just never leave your laptop in a car. I remember one of my technicians at the school district, she locked her laptop in her car in her garage, and someone broke into her garage and broke the window in her car and took the laptop. So even when you think it's protected, I would not leave computer equipment in a car, especially visible. Definitely not visible from the window. And then when at work, you should lock your laptop in a secure place or use cable locks. If you're going to leave your desk and leave the laptop, it should be locked in place so that somebody can't just walk by and grab it. Right, so malware, it's out there. Most of you and us have had a run-in with it at one time or another. But it's an unwanted program that means harm, and then it gets installed without your knowledge. Many times it comes installed with another program, right? The program might have a good use. You install it, but then it comes with unwanted uses, and and that'll happen a lot where it's attached with another program. And grayware is just an annoying, unwanted program. I'm not going to differentiate too much between malware and grayware, other than malware really intends harm, but grayware could just just slow your computer down or just be annoying. Viruses, of course, they're intended to do harm and infect others, but they require action on a user's part. Usually, clicking on something or doing something. Spyware is just collecting personal information. Major problem can be keyloggers. They log every keystroke that's made, and there's keyloggers that software and or hardware, and they can be very small, like just a little USB that's plugged into the back of a computer, and it's logging all the keystrokes, and then sending all the information, or they or storing it and they come back and retrieve it. But keyloggers are very, very bad to deal with, and sometimes very difficult to know that they're enabled. Worms copy themselves through the network, and they can overload the network. If they're not written correctly, they can totally overwhelm a network. but they don't require any user interaction. They just constantly scan the network for a new host that they can infect. Trojans do not need a host program to work. They substitute itself for a legitimate program, right? So you download something from the internet expecting it to do one thing, like maybe you're downloading a free movie, but it actually installs backdoor software that allows people in and to be able to utilize your computer remotely. So Trojans are bad. Rootkits. Rootkits are really difficult to deal with because they load themselves before the OS boot is complete. They hide in boot managers, bootloader programs, or even kernel mode device drivers. So they, many times operate, under the radar. The OS doesn't even know. You can't even see them. You can't find them. And it's almost impossible to get rid of. They can hide the folders, and they can hijack your Windows and mask it from Windows, right? And just all your utilities, all your admin tools will not find it, not see it, not know it's there, and they're almost impossible to get rid of. Ransomware. These exploits have become more and more popular, especially because of the advent of cryptocurrency. And they encrypt. Usually, they encrypt parts of your drive or your data, and hold you hostage until you pay them money, typically in a non-traceable cryptocurrency. It's really, really cruel. Although in a lot of cases, I guess they do release the data, but there's no guarantee that they will. You can pay the money and still not get your data back. Here's examples of where rootkits can be hiding their data, right? But typically it's in the kernel and loaded early on, and it's just hidden, and it intercepts processes from the OS, so that's how it can avoid capture and detection, because it actually captures the command to find it, and then gives you a false negative, or it gives you a false readout, or tells you something, and no, there's nothing here. Go look somewhere else because it's not here. Zero-day attacks, right? This is when someone discovers a security hole in software and it was unknown at the time, right? So they're able to exploit it. Nobody knows about it, and so they can take advantage of it because nobody has a fix for it. There's no patches. There's nothing. It's known as a zero-day exploit or an attack because it's just brand new. It was just found. Man-in-the-middle attacks. These are where the attacker is able to intercept your communications or get in between you and where you're communicating. Perfect example is like if you were at Starbucks or at a Wi-Fi hotspot, and you think you're connected to Starbucks, but you're actually connecting to the hacker's Wi-Fi that he's made it look like it's Starbucks. So then you're sending all your data to the hacker, and the hacker relays it to your bank or wherever, and then the bank sends it back to the hacker, and then the hacker sends it back to you, but they're in the middle, right? They're seeing the whole communication, and they're getting all the information. So that's a man-in-the-middle attack. There's other types, but that's basically the same way, is they're hijacking the communication so that they're seeing both sides of the communication, that they're in the middle. They're in between you and the other device. and reading and even altering the contents of the message, right? Denial of service, these are just kind of petty attacks, but they just try to overwhelm a network or a computer so that it can no longer accept legitimate traffic, right? And then a distributed denial of service attack, it just is, instead of one computer attacking the network, they might have thousands of computers, zombies, that they've recruited and hacked. All these innocent people who downloaded a free movie. Their systems now are zombies, and then are used to attack another company, and sometimes just deny service. And that's a distributed denial of service attack. Yeah, so the zombies, right, is a computer that has been hacked and is controlled by a hacker. And then a botnet is just an entire network of zombies. Dictionary attack, it's basically they're trying to crack a password, and they just send all the words in the dictionary trying to crack it, and maybe other lists, but it's just a brute force attempt at cracking a password, and just hoping that they get lucky, and they'll use some of the basic ones like password 123 or 1234567 they'll use simple passwords, but it's just a long list of passwords and words. It's called a dictionary attack. Rainbow tables, though, contain a long list of plain text passwords and the hashes after them, and uses a complex algorithm that tries to crack passwords. All right. So non-compliant systems and violations of security best practice. Okay. A system administrator needs techniques in place to routinely scan bring your own device and corporate owned devices for non-compliance, or those that violate security best practice, right? So you need a way of scanning and making sure that devices attached to your network are compliant and that they're not violating security best practice. System Center Configuration Manager by Microsoft, SCCM, is a product designed to scan devices for non-compliance, and it's very efficient, and it scales very well. But it's also costly too. But it is an enterprise level product that is very good at managing devices. All right, step-by-step attack plan to clean up an infected system. Okay, so right here are some warning signs that you might have: malicious software at work, problems with files, slow performance, etc. Right? So your action center may report that Windows Defender has been disabled and a rogue antivirus is running. Right? Okay. Certificate Manager can be used to view and delete root certificates kept in the store or trusted certificates, right? So if you do have any certificates, they'll be stored in the certificate in the store, certificate store, but and you can manage them with the Windows Certificate Manager. For the most part, you don't really have to deal with this too often, but if for some reason someone has put in a certificate that you didn't know or trust, then you could go in here and remove it. and things of that nature. So quarantining an affected system, right? So if a computer is infected, you need to take it off the network immediately. Turn off the wireless adapter, unplug the network cable. It should not be allowed on the regular network. You may have a isolated network that has no internet connection, has no connection to the other networks. Just a switch on your desk or something, right? Or a workbench. It's not connected to anything, but maybe your troubleshooting machine that you use just for seeing what happens. Just to tell what it's doing, things like that. But then you need to disconnect the computer, right? Let's see here. If you need to download anti-malware software, right? So they're saying disconnect other computers while infected computer is connected. Connect infected computer directly to ISP, boot in safe mode. Now, I wouldn't do any of that. I would definitely just download the anti-malware software, put it onto a USB, and then take the USB and put it into your isolated computer, off the network, and use that. I would never connect your infected machine to the ISP. If you know it's infected, take it off the network. Right, and that it just I don't agree with this. So I would immediately disconnect it, the cable, or turn off the wireless adapter. Move it to a place where you can work on it without it being connected on the network. If you need software, download it on a non-infected computer from a non-infected computer. Put it on a USB or external drive that you use just for infected computers, and then transfer it over that way. I would never reconnect it to the ISP. And then, of course, you may want to back up data before you try doing anything. But even then, you may be, if you should have already had a backup. If you're trying to back up your data now, it may be too late because the data may be corrupt and infected and unusable. But if you don't have a backup, you can try and back it up at this point, but it's not a good thing. You should hopefully already have a backup. Disabling system restore. So some malware hides its program files in restore points in the system volume, maintained by system protection. If the system protection is on, anti-malware software can't clean this protected file. To get rid of malware, turn off system protection so that anti-malware can clean the system volume information folder. And once you turn it off, all your restore points are lost. To turn off system protection, you can go to control panel, open systems window, click system protection, and you can turn it off and on. You can even do it from the command prompt if you can't log into Windows too, but I'll have you just do a search for that. But there's command lines where you can turn it on and off as well. So remediating the infected systems, right? Before selecting anti-malware software, read reviews and check out reliable websites that rate the anti-malware software. So if it won't boot, the boot manager, bootloader, or kernel mode drivers might be infected or damaged. Launch into Windows Recovery Environment, RE, and use the startup repair process to repair the system. update and run anti-malware software already installed. Install, run anti-malware software. Run it in safe mode. Run anti-malware scan before Windows boot. Run more than one scan. Clean up what's left over. Respond to any startup errors. Research malware types and program files. Delete the files. Delete the registry. Clean the registry of any bad configurations. Clean up your browsers and uninstall unwanted programs. A Trojan downloader put programs in the Windows temp folder, which must be manually deleted, right? So this is Windows Defender showing you that a Trojan has been found and it's in the temp folder, Windows temp folder. And installed several unwanted programs, which now need to be uninstalled. Once it's clean, best practice is to use anti-malware software. Always use software firewall and keep your Windows update current. And then once it is clean, also turn system protection back on and create a restore point. And then educating the user. Go over with the user some tips to help them keep safe. And even with everything in place, a user can still download and execute a Trojan or malware or virus, which can and will install more malware in the system. So it's good to educate the users to try to get them not to do that. ID departments rely on good documentation and security policies. They set expectations and standards, right? So we're going to cover some documentations and security policies and what you can expect as an IT technician here. All right, so knowledge base, right? It's just collection of articles, text, images, videos, tips, tricks, right? Questions. It's the knowledge base. It's usually searchable, and it can give information about your network, product, or service. And then inventory management. We definitely need to inventory all our devices and IP addresses, software licenses, everything like that. We need an inventory of all this, and so we need an inventory management process for this. We might use asset tags, theft prevention plates, barcodes, things like that to make our inventory easier. But there's still some kind of management software, most likely, or program out there that helps us maintain this. Should have a good password policy, tells users how complex to use of a password, how long, uppercase, lowercase, special characters, etc. How often they can need to change it, etc. We should have network topology diagrams, which are basically a map of our network, which shows our network and what's connected to what. These are very important. And here's an example of a network topology of a very simple network. Change management. So anytime you implement something, you make a change to anything, right? We use this process called change management. It's a way of managing our changes, documenting what we've done. It is closely integrated with project management. And so if you're installing new software, how will it affect people? How will you communicate the new software, the schedule, the new software, train, your training, your support, what happens if you need to back out. This is all covered in your change management. And so here's just a simple flow diagram of a change, right? So you got the purpose of the change, you got the change request, what are you changing? Are you installing software? Are you implementing a server? Are you putting in a router? What's the change? How has it been tested? How do you know it's good? And then how will you back it out if necessary? You have everything you can imagine, all this information in your request. It'll go to the change approval board, CAB, and it'll be reviewed by certain experts and management, because they need to know, if you're implementing new software onto the accounting servers, right? Do you have a way of notifying all the users that could be impacted if the accounting server goes down, right? So those people will be involved in this, and everybody will look at it and make sure the dates and everything are match, so they don't want, you don't want to put this in like if it was for the accounting servers, on payroll weekend, right? You don't want to be doing that. But then they'll approve it, or they'll look at it, and then right. So then you'll need the business needs scope, risk analysis, backup plan. You get requests for comments, and it could go through this review, right? Actually, all this, in my opinion, is above before the approval. And then you get the approval, then you implement the change. Was it successful? You fill out why it was successful, and if it was not successful, you fill out why it was not successful and how did the back out go, and then you close the report. Document business processes that are related activities that lead to a desired goal. So efficient, cost-effective service, excellent customer satisfaction, superior product, right? It's the purpose of the change. States what needs to be changed. Complex changes are often submitted to a change advisory board or change approval board, a CAB, and most of the time, most changes are going to go through that anymore. They're very adverse to changes causing outages. So the change plan and scope defines the scope of the change, right? What's the components, the skill set, tasks, individuals or departments that will participate in the change, and also individual departments that might be impacted by the change. And then how the success of a change will be measured when the change is complete. Risk analysis, right? So almost any change involves risk, right? So you'll have a risk analysis trying to identify the potential problems and harms and what's the risk exposure, so that there's no surprises. So what's the worst case scenario? How likely is that to happen? How much downtime would this cause? How many users would get impacted? How much money would it cost? Would it cause bad reputation to the company? All these factors go into the risk analysis. Then you need a backup plan. So if it were to fail, what do you do? How do you back it out? How do you remove what you tried to implement and restore it to a working original state, right? And then how are you testing it? End user acceptance, right? The users must know the purpose of the change, how the change will affect their job, how much training do they need, etc. And then request for comments is just requests for user feedback to a change. And then everything related to the change must be documented. The better documentation, the better off you are, especially when things go wrong. And then, of course, many large organizations will use change management software. Alloy software, I've never heard of it, but there's HP has software that many large companies use. There's drawing a blank on the others, but Remedy, right? That smaller, medium-sized companies use. But there's a lot of change management software out there, and most organizations will use it if they have any kind of complexity or large network. Smaller organizations may just manually document a change in Word or Excel. And then we have some regulatory and compliance policies, right? So certain types of data are protected by special government regulations called regulated data, and must comply with a variety of regulations, policies, and laws, right? So a lot of industries must comply with a variety of regulations, policies, and laws, and are collectively called regulatory compliance policies. And here's some examples, right? Personal identified information, PII, health information, PHI, the credit card companies, if you deal with credit card numbers, you'd have to deal with payment card industry or PCI standards. And then if you're a citizen of the EU, if you're dealing with their data, you got the General Data Protection Regulations. You have SOX and Gramm-Leach Bly if you're larger companies here in the U.S. There's many others out there too. Software licensing, so right, a lot of times you need to buy software that you didn't develop and use, and so you get a commercial license, the right to use the software, but you don't own the software, you just have the right to use it. You may have the right to copy the work, called a copyright. You have an end user license agreement, it's an agreement between you and the software owner, and dictates how you can use it when you install the software. And if you make unauthorized copies of original software, it violates the Federal Copyright Act of 1976 and is called software piracy. Here's an example of the license agreement that almost no one reads, but you're held to it. And when you say, I accept the agreement, then we've got some incident response for prohibitive content and activities. So an incident is when an employer or person has negatively affected safety or corporate resources, violated the code of conduct for the organization, or committed a crime, right? So that's what is a security incident. The first response duties, if you need to identify and go through the proper channels, preserve the data and devices, and do documentation, do the incident documentation. So there's certain ways to destroy printed documents or sanitize storage devices, right? You may want to overwrite the data on the drive. For solid-state drives, you use a secure erase utility. Then you physically want to destroy the storage media, right? For managing your devices, you could use a degausser. Exposes the storage device to strong electromagnetic field and just completely erases it. They have shredders that will shred it. And use security data destruction services. So, a lot of times what I do with my older hard drives, the spinning drives, what I did is, one, I'd hold on to them for a very long time, but two, I would take them apart and I would destroy the disks themselves, and then I would take them to a metal salvager and recycler, and then have them, but I would take them in pieces and parts over time, so that nobody could ever get them. Of course, I formatted them, and zeroed them out. But you need to make sure that it's totally erased, because there are devices out there that can, even after it's erased, that they can pull the data back. So you want to physically destroy the older spinning disk, and in solid state drive